Imagine standing in a sunlit clearing 15,000 years ago. You've just finished sharing a roasted deer with 30 other people. Nobody in this group owns the land. Nobody pays rent. Nobody has a boss. If one person tries to flex their muscles, start barking orders, and tell everyone else what to do, something fascinating happens. The group laughs at them. If they keep doing it, the group shuns them. And if they really push it, 3 or 4 guys take them into the woods at night, and they don't come back. For 99% of human existence, that was the default setting. Absolute, uncompromising, peer-to-peer equality. Now, fast forward a few thousand years. You're standing in the dust outside the walls of ancient Uruk, or along the Nile. Tens of thousands of human beings are breaking their backs in the midday heat, dragging massive blocks of limestone, storing tons of grain in colossal granaries, and handing over half their harvest every season. All because one guy sitting in a cool stone palace said so. One guy who physically isn't any stronger than anyone else, who bleeds when cut, and who sleeps just as helplessly as a caveman in a tent. How on earth did that happen? Seriously, think about this for a second. On paper, human surrender to authority is a total mystery. Why would millions of free, armed, self-sufficient humans hand over their autonomy, their food, and their lives to a tiny elite group of rulers? Why didn't they just spear the guy and go back to doing whatever they wanted? It's easy to assume someone just walked in with a bigger club and forced everyone to obey. But force alone cannot explain it. You can't hold a sword to the necks of 10,000 people at the same time, especially when those 10,000 people outnumber your guards 100 to 1. Something far deeper happened, a fundamental rewiring of the human social contract, a strange psychological and environmental trap that sprang closed on our species. Let's break down how the first rulers actually came to be. To understand how rulers were invented, you first have to realize that for most of our history, humans actively suppressed leaders. Anthropologists call this the reverse dominance hierarchy. In wild chimpanzee societies, the biggest, meanest male bullies his way to the top. But early humans did something revolutionary. They used weapons, language, and collective intelligence to gang up on would-be bullies. If an aggressive hunter tried to hoard meat or command the band, the rest of the group used social weapons. They used ridicule, mocking the bully's ego to deflate their standing. They used ostracism, refusing to share food or fires with them. And as a last resort, execution, assassinating the aspiring tyrant while he slept. This kept human societies radically egalitarian for hundreds of thousands of years. But it only worked because of a biological boundary known as Dunbar's number. Formulated by evolutionary psychologists, this is the cognitive limit to the number of stable social relationships a human brain can maintain, roughly 150 people. In a group smaller than 150, you know everyone. You know who is trustworthy, who is lazy, who owes you a favor, and who is a liar. You don't need police, courts, or kings, because gossip and shared reputation enforce order naturally. So, what shattered that baseline? Agriculture. Around 12,000 years ago, the glaciers melted, the climate stabilized, and human groups in regions like the Fertile Crescent began experimenting with farming. On the surface, farming looks like an upgrade. In reality, it was a psychological and ecological trap. When humans were hunter-gatherers, if a local area ran out of food or a toxic person started causing trouble, the band simply picked up their spears and walked away. Mobility was freedom. But once a community clears a forest, plants wheat, builds irrigation canals, and waits 6 months for a harvest, they are anchored. They cannot just leave. Walking away means starving. And farming did something else even more explosive. It produced storable surplus. Hunter-gatherers ate what they caught within days. You can't hoard a dead mammoth. But grain, wheat, barley, rice, and corn can sit in a dry room for years. Grain is visible, countable, and easily stolen. For the first time in human history, there was something worth plundering on a massive scale. And that created two immediate problems that human psychology was entirely unprepared for: the scale crisis and the defense crisis. As agricultural villages grew, populations blew right past Dunbar's 150-person limit. Suddenly, thousands of strangers were living side by side. You didn't know the guy living 3 huts down. You didn't know if you could trust him. When disputes broke out over water rights or stolen goats, gossip no longer worked. The group was too big to laugh the troublemaker out of town. Communities were facing total social breakdown from internal conflict alongside constant threats from nomadic raiders on the outside. They desperately needed a central coordinator, someone to settle arguments, manage the communal grain, and organize defense. Enter the big man. Human psychology has two distinct pathways to social status: prestige and dominance. Dominance is force-based. Think of an alpha wolf or a mugger. People obey out of fear of punishment. Prestige is merit-based. People freely defer to someone because they possess valuable skills, wisdom, or generosity. The very first rulers didn't take power by dominance. They acquired it through prestige. Anthropologists call this the big man phenomenon. In early farming villages, an ambitious individual wouldn't demand taxes. Instead, he would work harder, produce a surplus of grain, and host massive public feasts. He gave away food, settled petty arguments, and organized defensive walls. To the village, this guy was a hero. They gladly listened to him because deferring to his judgment made their lives easier and safer. The brain's natural bias towards reciprocity kicked in. He gave us food and safety. The least we can do is follow his advice. But then came the ultimate psychological hack that transformed helpful big men into permanent absolute monarchs: the exploitation of shared myths. Humans possess a cognitive quirk evolutionary biologists call hyperactive agency detection. When our ancestors heard a bush rustle in the night, the brain automatically assumed it was a predator, not the wind. Assuming agency, that an invisible entity is intentionally doing something, kept us alive. Naturally, early humans applied this logic to the entire universe. Why did it rain? Someone up there wanted it to. Why did the crops wither? An invisible entity is angry. Early leaders realized that managing human trust was difficult, but managing human fear of the unseen was terrifyingly effective. The big man stopped saying, "Listen to me because I'm wise," and started saying, "Listen to me because I am the only one who knows how to talk to the gods." In ancient Sumer around 4000 BC, the first major cities like Eridu and Uruk weren't built around palaces. They were built around temples. The earliest rulers were not military generals. They were priest kings. Consider how brilliant this psychological maneuver was. First, the priest king claims the god owns the land and the grain harvest. Second, if the population doesn't bring a portion of their yield to the temple, the god will send floods, droughts, or blights. Third, obeying the ruler is no longer about submitting to a mere human. It's about aligning with the cosmic architecture of the universe. When a human believes that disobeying a leader will bring down divine fire or destroy their family's food supply, rebellion isn't just dangerous, it's insane. The ruler became the ultimate middleman between survival and apocalypse. Once a priest king successfully convinced thousands of people to hand over a percentage of their grain as a divine tax, the political landscape fundamentally shifted. The ruler now sat on top of an enormous surplus of physical wealth, and that wealth bought the one thing that permanently locked hierarchy into place: full-time specialists. In a hunter-gatherer or early farming tribe, everyone was a part-time warrior. There was no professional army. But a ruler with granaries full of wheat could afford to pay a group of men to do nothing except train with weapons, maintain body armor, and guard the palace. This was the shift from prestige to dominance. Once the ruler had a dedicated force of professional armed guards, the social contract changed forever. If an average farmer said, "I don't think the king actually talks to the rain god, and I'm keeping my grain," the ruler didn't have to argue. He sent 4 men with bronze spears to confiscate the grain and burn the hut down as an example. The crowd had officially lost its ability to execute the bully. The reverse dominance hierarchy was dead. To keep this massive new system running, rulers invented another tool around 3400 BC in Sumer: writing. Cuneiform wasn't invented to write epic poetry or romantic stories. The earliest written tablets ever discovered are tax receipts, livestock tallies, and grain inventories. Writing was a technology designed to make human beings legible to the state, to turn free people into manageable data points. Over the next 5,000 years, this fundamental template evolved through several distinct phases. First came the god-king phase during the Bronze Age, seen in ancient Egypt and early Mesopotamian empires. Here, the ruler wasn't just a mediator for God. The ruler was a god. Pharaoh was the physical incarnation of Horus. To question the pharaoh was to question gravity or the sunrise. Then came the feudal and divine right phase in the Middle Ages, seen across medieval Europe and imperial China with the mandate of heaven. Here, the ruler is human, but explicitly appointed by the divine. Disobeying the king is a mortal sin against God. Society was structured like an organic body. The king is the head, the knights are the arms, and the peasants are the feet. And the feet don't argue with the head. Finally, we reach the bureaucratic and legal state of the modern era, with constitutional monarchies, republics, and modern democracies. Here, authority moves away from divine bloodlines and attaches itself to impersonal institutions. You don't obey a police officer or a president because you think they are sacred. You obey the office they temporarily hold, backed by a legal framework designed to keep chaos at bay. Here's the mind-bending question. If living under early rulers meant back-breaking labor, taxes, conscription into wars, and loss of personal freedom, why didn't humans collectively destroy the system and run back into the woods? Because as brutal as early states were, the alternative was often far worse. Archaeological data on violence in pre-state societies revealed something shocking. While modern state wars kill vast numbers of people, the percentage of the population killed in continuous, unchecked tribal warfare among stateless societies was drastically higher. By some estimates, up to 20 to 30 times higher than in state societies. Without a central ruler holding a monopoly on violence, societies fell into endless cycles of blood feuds, raids, and vendettas. If someone murdered your brother, your family had to murder them back. Then their family retaliated, and it never stopped. Philosopher Thomas Hobbes famously called life in a state of nature solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Rulers offered a brutal, cynical bargain, but it was a bargain nonetheless. Give up your absolute autonomy, pay your taxes, and bow your head, and in exchange, the king will enforce internal peace and keep foreign invaders from slaughtering your family. Humans didn't accept rulers because they suddenly loved being bossed around. They accepted them because centralized tyranny was slightly more predictable than decentralized chaos. So when you step back and look at the grand arc of human history, the emergence of rulers wasn't a mistake. It was an evolutionary trade-off. We evolved for millions of years to live in tiny, egalitarian bands where everyone knew your name, no one held power over you, and social pressure kept bullies in check. But when agriculture forced us to live alongside tens of thousands of strangers, that ancient operating system crashed. To prevent total societal collapse, our ancestors exploited deep psychological vulnerabilities, our fear of the unseen, our deference to prestige, and our desperate need for security, to invent something completely foreign to our biology, the ruler. Today, you stop at a red light in the middle of the night on an empty road. You hand over a massive chunk of your paycheck every year to an invisible tax authority. You follow laws written by people you've never met. You do all of this not because you're weak, but because deep down, your brain is still running that ancient code. A code written thousands of years ago in the dusty fields of the Fertile Crescent, where a free species decided that predictable order under a king was better than absolute freedom in the dark. So here's something worth sitting with. If you'd been born in that clearing, free, equal, and one bad winter away from starving,
Would you have taken the deal? Freedom and danger, or safety and a king? Tell me in the comments. I actually read them. And if you want more of these hidden mechanics behind everyday life, subscribe. There's a lot more buried under the surface.